County Library presents Bees and Beekeeping, a discussion about the roles of bees in our ecosystem and the basics of beekeeping. Joining us is Hannah Price, Education Coordinator of the Bees Alive Club of Nixa, Missouri.
Hannah, thank you for joining us today at Christian County Library. We just have a few questions for you about bees and beekeeping. So first of all, what different kind of bees are there to be found, and where would you find them?
That is a very good question. So there are many different types of bees. There's anything from Africanized bees, Russian bees, Carnelian bees, New World Carnelians, Caucasian, Italians. There are so many, but the most common that beekeepers have are Italians, Russians, and Carnelians. And Italians, they are founded in Italy. And the Russians, obviously, in Russia. And then the Carnelians, which are one of my favorite bees, they are found in southern Austria.
Interesting. So are these bees then able to go to other places? Like for beekeepers like you, would you have like a Russian bee here in Nixa?
Yes, I do. Yeah, so originally they come from Russia. But they are bred here as well, and they kind of get used to our environment. So whenever you are a beekeeper, you want to find local bees to where you're from. So if you're from around here, you want to find someone that is selling bees. It can be Russian, it can be Carnelians, etc. But usually they're here for a while that they get used to that environment. But they also carry those genetics over to where they're like the Russian bees are used to colder environments, so they survive their winter longer.
I see. Are there any bees that are native to America or to kind of this region, or is it my understanding then that bees they come from other parts of the world to the United States?
A lot of them do, yes. And then there are one type of bees that we want to stay away from, and that is Africanized bees, also known as killer bees. And there are some spotted in the U.S., more southern states, so Texas, that area, but they are slowly moving up.
Wow. I had no idea about any of that, honestly, so that's really interesting.
These are very interesting.
Yeah. Hannah, thank you again for telling us about the different kinds of bees. So why then are those bees so important to our ecosystem, and why is it important that we protect the bee population?
All right, so make sure you thank a bee, because about 1/4 of every tablespoon of food that you eat comes from a bee. They fly about 2 miles around their hive to collect pollen and resources. They pollinate about 2,000 flowers a day just so they could get about this much of honey for them. But they help pollinate all of the flowers and food for us.
That's so interesting. So it's very important then that we protect bees and encourage their pollination because of these reasons.
Yes, no spraying. Make sure you plant lots and lots of flowers, gardens. Stay away from the pesticides, because a lot of pesticides are killing bees nowadays.
I see. So since they're so important to pollination and our food supply, what would happen if there were less bees or there were no bees?
So Albert Einstein once quoted, "If bees disappeared on the face of Earth, we would only have 4 years left to live."
So they have that large of an impact on our survival.
They do, wow. Yeah. So don't squish that bee, thank the bee.
Yes. Usher the way to a flower.
Yes.
Cool. So, Hannah, obviously bees are really important, as you just highlighted.
Yes.
So what can people do to kind of help promote bee populations? Like, how does one become a beekeeper, per se?
That is a very good question and a very easy answer. How to become a beekeeper is just do it. Start taking lessons. Learn from your local beekeepers. Read some good books. Go online, research. The best thing you can do is learn before you become a beekeeper, before you get your toes wet. Find a local bee club, join it before you even become a beekeeper, and see what these beekeepers do and learn from them.
Gotcha. And so Another thing for our patrons that they might be wondering is what kind of beekeepers are there? Are all beekeepers the same? Do different beekeepers do different things? Are there different styles of beekeeping? What could you tell us about that?
Yes, yes, and yes. So, there are different types of beekeepers. There are lazy beekeepers, which pretty much you go through your hive maybe once in like a month. Then there are very proactive beekeepers. You're in there constantly. And then there's commercial beekeepers, aside from hobbyists. A lot of beekeepers are hobbyists, and then you'll see commercial beekeepers who have like thousands of hives, and they drive them over to California to pollinate the almond fields or different fields, stuff like that.
So they'll actually transport their hives
Yes.
across the country
Yeah.
to pollinate other areas. I had no idea. I thought it was all a local operation every time. So that's really interesting.
Yep, gotta pollinate those almond fields.
Yes. Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
So Hannah, now that you kind of mentioned the different types of beekeepers and kind of what they do, can you explain more about the typical experience of a beekeeper? What do you do as a beekeeper?
Like how I check my hives and everything?
Sure.
Yeah, so a beekeeper day to day, they will usually beekeepers have hives just like this. This is called a Langstroth hive. They will suit up. They will wear something just like this with a hood and gloves here. What a beekeeper does is her main goal is to make sure that the hive is healthy. So they will go in there, make sure the queen is laying her eggs, laying her brood, and all that. So I'm just going to open this up and let you guys take a look. So what we have here, a beekeeper will take something called a hive tool, or I like to call it a mini crowbar. And it usually has a bunch of like propolis on it, which is also called bee glue. Bees use propolis to stick frames and stuff together because bees do not like their furniture being moved. So this comes in handy for a beekeeper. You will always need one of these.
To kind of break up.
Yeah, so I'll lift this up so you guys can see. So what a beekeeper does is they take their hive tool and they will prop each corner just like this because it'll be full of propolis. And they can use this little hook right here to grab onto the frame and lift up. But you, as a beekeeper, you want to be very careful and gentle because you don't want to squish your queen. So you'll take your frame out nice and straight like this. What you do is you inspect each hive or each frame. So a frame will have bees all like this on it. So you want to hold it up, hold it against the sun, look for your queen. What you're really looking for is the eggs. You want to see all different stages of egg, or from egg to larva. And so you can flip your frame up just like that. Look, that. Put it back in just like that. And usually you'll have bees flying everywhere, but don't worry. Some beekeepers use smokers to calm the bees down. Other beekeepers like me will use sugar water, and you just kind of spritz the frame of bees, and what they do is they get busy cleaning themselves off. They don't really worry about you. But it's always good to have a smoker on hand because when a bee stings you, it sends out an alarm pheromone, and basically there's a big bullseye on your body, and other bees will come and they will try to attack you.
Wow, so that's why you might see in like a movie or something like a swarm of bees attacking.
Yes.
So yeah, I didn't even realize that. You mentioned trying to find the queen. How would you identify which bee is the queen? Can you talk about that for a second?
Yes. So queens are my absolute favorite. So there's only one queen per hive, and she's usually a lot bigger than the other bees. She has a longer abdomen and shorter wings, and it's big and bright. A lot of beekeepers and other people get confused between what a drone is and a queen.
So what other kind of like equipment would you need to be a beekeeper? And is beekeeping kind of an all-year thing? Is it a seasonal thing? You know, we see clearly more bees, I think, out and about during the spring and summertime. But
Correct.
how does that affect your activities as a beekeeper?
So that kind of goes back to different kinds of bees. Beekeepers. Some are lazy and some are proactive. If you're a very proactive beekeeper, you're in your bees all year long. So the typical rule is you don't want to open up your hive unless it's 55 degrees and above, just because they cluster in a ball to keep that queen warm, and they vibrate the muscle on their wings, and they keep their hive about 95 degrees all year long.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah,
wow.
So if you go in there on a colder day and you break that cluster, it takes them a while to get that hive warm again. But if you're a proactive beekeeper, you're always in there kind of checking your hives, making sure everything's okay. You can feed them in the winter. But a hobbyist usually just gets into their hives around from anywhere between late February all the way to October, depending on the weather. Like I said, it has to be a certain degree outside. But you will mostly see a lot of beekeepers in their hives around springtime and summertime.
Okay. And you mentioned feeding the bees during the winter. What are you feeding them at that point, since they're not going out and like pollinating flowers and getting all of that?
So bees always need food to survive, and usually right before winter time they pack in a lot of honey for themselves, but sometimes it's not enough to get through, and you want to make sure that your bees are going to make it through. So us beekeepers make what we call sugar cakes, which is basically sugar water, and you bake it and it hardens. The reason why we don't do sugar water on the front of the hive or up top during the winter is because it'll freeze.
Okay, that's so interesting. I had no idea about any of that. So, all right, well, thank you.
No problem.
All right, so Hannah, what other interesting facts about bees do you want our patrons to know? I'm sure there's so many things you could say, but
there are so many things I could say. Let's go into the ages of bees. So when you look at a bee, you can tell how old they are because of their hair. When a new bee comes out, when they hatch from their cell, they are all hairy. And then as they age, they begin to lose their hair because they're constantly cleaning themselves off, because bees are very hygienic. They don't like any things in their hive. They don't like to be dirty. So that goes on with what a worker bee does. So let's talk about, as a worker bee ages, they all have a different role to play. So as soon as they start working from day one, as soon as they start hatching out of their cell, they're already working. And there's so many jobs that can be done. There's nurse bees, there's guard bees, there's foragers. Don't get confused with the bee movie. All the little bees that you see flying around on the flowers are not boys, they're girls. They are called the worker bees.
So the majority are going to be female?
Yes, 90% of your hive are all females. And then you have your drones. The drones are the boys, and their only role is to mate with the queen. And remember, you only have one queen per hive. So the queen will go out on her mating flight, and she'll only have one mating flight her entire life. And she will mate with about 25 drones, and she will come back, and she'll start laying 2,000 eggs a day.
Wow, and she continues to lay that amount of eggs as long as she's healthy, I assume,
yes,
her whole life?
The queen will live about 5 years, but you want to replace her after 3, just so you can get better genetics, and she starts kind of getting old and laying less eggs.
I see. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what else could you tell us about the queen? Like, what happens when it's time for a new queen in a hive?
So, remember when I said there can only be one queen per hive? So, sometimes the old queen will leave with some of the bees, and that is called a swarm. Other times they'll kill her, but they will never ever leave without queen cells or in preparation for a new queen. So, what happens is they'll make several queen cells, and then whichever one with the stronger genetics will hatch, and the stronger pheromones, she will remain and she will kill all the other queens. If there are two that hatch out at the same time, then it's battle. They will roll up in a ball and try to kill each other, and whichever one wins is the new queen.
And it's just, I assume, like their instinctual, like makeup, like their genetic makeup to do these things.
Yes. And sometimes in rare cases, there's a mother-daughter situation where there's actually two queens in a hive, and they'll both be laying, and that's when your hive is just absolutely ginormous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I had no idea. Okay, so obviously bees are really important, Hannah,
Absolutely.
And there's a lot that goes into being a beekeeper as well. What can people do to kind of support bees and bee populations if they can't become an actual beekeeper? What are their other options?
So one of the biggest thing is buy from your local beekeeper. Support your local beekeeper because they go through a lot of work, and a lot of people just go to the store to buy honey, but it's not actually local. If you buy from your local beekeeper, get to know them, just learn about bees. That will help us remember to be nicer to them, to not spray pesticides and chemicals. Plant flowers. They like lavender, mint, have a pretty flower garden, all kinds of things. Don't spray. That's one of the biggest things.
Don't spray pesticides.
Don't
and
spray
things like
pesticides.
that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then for the honey that you find in stores, you mentioned that it wasn't local. What else could you tell us about honey versus, the honey in stores versus the honey that you would get from a local beekeeper?
One good friend of mine from High Five Honey Company did a video about honey not actually being local honey. If you look on the back of your honey bottle, sometimes it'll say local or from Canada or Argentina. And that is not local because local is like within 50 miles from you.
Okay.
And a lot of it is shipped over from like China and stuff. And it just has a bunch of like corn syrup in it. And
okay. So it's not like a pure honey.
It's not from a real beekeeper and not from localized.
Okay. That's really interesting. Good to know.
Yeah.
So we might look at local farmers markets and things like that. Is that where we would maybe find
yes
beekeepers and local honey?
Farmers markets? Go to your farmers markets. If you know anybody, your friends might be a beekeeper. If you just know a beekeeper, reach out to them. Try to buy their honey instead of going to the store and buying the fake stuff.
And I assume maybe patrons could also reach out to the Bees Alive Club.
Yes. Bees Alive Club, which I'm part of, and many beekeepers. If you guys want to reach out to us, we have lots of beekeepers who sell honey, and I'm sure we'll be more than willing to sell some honey to you guys.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again for joining us today.
No problem.
I think we learned a lot about the different kinds of bees, just kind of the basics of beekeeping for people who might be interested, and then some really interesting facts about bees and queens.
Yeah, there's so much
everything.
to know.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot more that you could talk about.
Oh, I can go on for hours.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
We hope you learned something new about the importance of bees, the inner working of the hive, and the basics of beekeeping. For more information about bees and beekeeping, check out Bees Alive Club of Nixa at beesaliveclub.org and these resources available through Christian County Library.